All right, today we're going to be analyzing the children in both the dramas of A Doll's House and Raisin in the Sun. And this is something I'm really passionate about because I work with kids. And one of my favorite quotes about children is the quote by Adolf Hitler. And it says this. It says, "Give me the children and I will change society in 10 years." Now, Adolf Hitler isn't someone that we would admire, but this quote is something very true. If we can get a hold of children, it will change our society. So let's look at the lives of the children or the author or the childhood of the authors of these two plays, just briefly. So we know some things about Henrik Ibsen and that he grew up in Norway, right? And from the surface, his childhood looked good, but there was a lot of suspicion that went around that his parents, who one was his stepfather, his dad died when he was young, that there was some moral failure in that relationship. And that people actually think that Dr. Rank and Nora's relationship could have been hinted at because he often chooses characters based on people in like his real life. And then we also know that at Norway and really in the world at that time in the 1800s, there was kids were raised by nurses. They weren't like readily, the moms didn't really take care of them. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And then Lorraine, okay, right, she grew up in the midst of great racial tension, and she dealt with a lot of discrimination in her childhood. She was really close to her father, but he died when she was 15, and she blames racial discrimination on that because he is similar to the story in Raisin of the Sun. He died, but not that the guy in the Raisin of the Sun died, but that he tried to buy a house and kind of got bullied out of it, and that's what she thinks caused him to die. Her family experiences, right? I just mentioned that, but then Chicago, right, was one of the most segregated places. Schools didn't become diverse until 1980s. And so a lot of things going on in her childhood. So let's look at the children in A Doll's House. We see that the first time we see mention of the children really is when Mrs. Lindy comes, and aside from the mom buying gifts, but then Mrs. Lindy comes and the children are allowed to see her because they're with the nurse. They're not readily available to her. We see that Krogstad had children and he cared a lot about his children, although he was poor. Nora praises her children all the time, just kind of like her husband does with her. Nora engages with the children in a game of hide and seek. So she's engaged in some fashion, but instantly sends the children away. As soon as Krogstad comes, they're not involved in any kind of adult issues. Nora tells the children not to tell their father of Krogstad's visit, so some dishonesty. Children, again, beg to play a game with their mom, but then she's so kind of taken back by Krogstad's visit that she sends them away. So just can bring them, can send them, just kind of whatever works for her. Lindy wants to be a mother to Krogstad's children, so being a mother is something that's treasured. Nora decides to just up and leave her children, right? At the end, there's not a lot with the children in this play, but there's a few times, and then she just decides she's going to up and leave them. The children seem to have everything they want, but yet they lose everything. And there's no recorded interaction between the children and their father. So those are some things I noticed about the children in A Doll's House. Now let's look at A Raisin in the Sun. Travis is the only child we see here. He sleeps on the couch in a small apartment, is begging for 50 cents from his parents. His dad gives him the mother his money, but after his mom says no. He knows about the money situation. He's really involved in the adult affairs. We see that very plainly. He goes to school. He's encouraged to do so by the adults in his life. He lives with his grandma, aunt, and his mom and dad. There's constant arguing and bickering in the home. And then his father has a drinking problem, right? He has to do chores, but grandma's kind of taking it easy on him. Grandma really cares about Travis. He's commanded kind of around by the others in the house, and he's punished harshly. So let's kind of compare and contrast these two upbringings. So there's like a large house, there's a small house, there's maids who clean, whereas Travis had to do chores. There was a clean house, whereas we see in Raisin of the Sun, they find roaches in the house. You have a workaholic father, an alcoholic father. So still disengaged fathers, which is really important. Distant mother, kind of an engaged mother. Ruth was pretty engaged in Travis's life. You have raised by nurse, raised by parents. Lived with parents, whereas Travis is in a multi-generational house. Bedrooms, slept on couch. A family was high in society, whereas the younger family was viewed very poorly in society. Kept out of adult issues, engaged in adult issues. Saw mother wig out, saw father entitled, disadvantaged. Looking good on the outside, obvious issues. So there's these different contrasts in how these children were raised, but really neither of them had a home that created a really safe place for those children. Neither home had biblical teaching, which, as we see in the Bible, that's the key to having a generation that seeks the Lord, is having biblical teaching to children. Children weren't really valued, right? You don't see, yeah, they cared about their kids, but they weren't really highly valued, even with the abortion that was talked about with the younger family, another way that they're just not valued. And then there's really not healthy marriages. And when parents don't have a healthy relationship, it really hinders the children. There's a quote that I think kind of sums up so well the importance of home life for children. And it says, "The home is the first and most effective place to learn the lessons of life, truth, honor, virtue, self-control, the value of education, honest work, and the purpose and privilege of life. Nothing can take the place of home in the rearing and teaching children, and no other success can compensate for failure in the home." And I think that kind of sums up the failure that we see in the home lives of these children in these dramas. They're not valued, they're not taught about God, and their life as adults that's going to come out in their life as adults. And it made me think how these authors both were writing about things that were really passionate to them, that had something to do even with their own childhood. And it made me think that if I was ever to write a play, I think I would want to write a play about how society views children and how children are not valued, because children are often victimized, and having a play that talked about that would maybe help people to see that children matter, and that if we could get a hold of children, then we could change our society in the future.